What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I've been doing master research and preparing for an extensive project that I have going. Article after article after article after article, writing and typing away. Matter of fact, I have to make another trip down to Florida to visit a friend, a historian friend of mine, former writer. As a matter of fact, he has tons of articles that were never printed in magazines or handwritten that we'll be going over. He was at the Fifth Street Gym when Muhammad Ali would train there, and Willie Pastrano and many others, Luis Rodriguez. And he has so many notes that he jot down of personal things that happened at the gym and fights that were supposed to take place and so on and so forth. So I'll be visiting him and getting firsthand information from my old friend there. But speaking of Muhammad Ali, I came across a program, one of the programs that I have, of Muhammad Ali and Smoking Joe Frazier, their second fight on a Monday night, January 28, 1974 in New York's Madison Square Garden. They were fighting for the NABF Heavyweight Championship crown. Joe Frazier was staying 5'5", weighed 209 pounds, and was the former undisputed heavyweight champion from Beaufort, South Carolina. He would make the NABF, WBA, WBC, New York SAC, and ring belt his property. July 26, 1971, he would win the vacant NABF Heavyweight Championship title from Jimmy Ellis. And that particular fight showed me what Joe Frazier was really made of. That left hook was probably one of the greatest left hooks ever thrown. Now, Sugar Ray Robinson would throw a massive left hook against Gene Fomer. Bob Foster and Dick Tiger, many of them throughout the years. But that left hook was unbelievable because he pivoted. And the arc of the punch, it was a short punch, the way it was executed. There's no way Jimmy Ellis would recover from that. And it's one of the things that you study when you're trying to analyze a specific punch or a knockout from another fighter. How he executes the punch, how he set up the opponent in order for the opponent to be vulnerable for the contact of the punch so he doesn't recover. Not so much that he hits him with it, but he puts him in a position that he's not ready to take. He's not ready to accept or absorb. And that's what I look at when I'm watching fights, the execution, the setup of the punch. And he would fight Muhammad Ali, who was known as the greatest. He had a 78-inch reach, stood 6'3", weighed 212 pounds, and was a former World Heavyweight Championship fighter. He was from Louisville, Kentucky, and would fight at New York's Madison Square Garden. The referee was Tony Perez, and he attempts to stop the contest 10 seconds before the bell would ring, and the audience would be in uproar. There were 20,748 members of that audience. And it was shown on ABC Wild World of Sports, April 29, 1961 to January 3rd, 1998, was the life of that program. And ABC Sports was a thing that I enjoyed watching when boxing came on, because Howard Cosell, as quiet as it's kept, one of the greatest sports announcers, but boxing was his passion. And he lost the passion when Larry Holmes would fight a fighter by the name of Tex Cobb. Larry Holmes had beat him mercifully. And Howard Cosell, he couldn't see that anymore. Muhammad Ali was out of the picture. Larry Holmes really wasn't as appreciated as Muhammad Ali was. And that was an exit for Howard Cosell to get out of the sport. But ABC Sports, the agony of defeat, that was some program. January 23rd, 1974, ABC Studios, Howard Cosell, Muhammad Ali and Smoking Joe Frazier would enter the studio. And they were talking about the first fight as they were setting up the second fight. And they were into the 11th round. Muhammad Ali had called Joe Frazier ignorant because Joe Frazier had mentioned to Ali that he was in the hospital for several days. He said, "I put you in the hospital." And Ali didn't like that because Joe Frazier was in the hospital himself for several days. And both men would get into a scuffle because Joe Frazier would remove his earpiece and he would stand up over Ali. And he had his hands fist in a ball of fist, a fist of fire, I call it. And Ali's brother Rudy would walk up to Joe Frazier. Eddie Futch would walk up to Joe Frazier because they knew Joe Frazier was going to hit him. And Ali knew he was going to get hit by Joe Frazier because Joe Frazier was from a town called Black Bottom, Beaufort, South Carolina. And one thing Joe Frazier didn't do is play games. He was a man of integrity, man of honor, and a man of substance. He knew he didn't have to sell fights as long as Ali's name was attached to him. So Ali would stand up and grab Joe Frazier and fall to the canvas, which was the studio. Both men were fined $5,000 for deplorable and unsportsmanlike conduct. They were fined by the New York SAC. But Muhammad Ali, who had a record of 56 wins, 37 knockouts, 5 losses, and he was stopped once, and that was by Larry Holmes, fought from 1960 to 1981. His name was Cassius Marcellus Clay. He was born January 17, 1942, and he died June 3rd, 2016. He was 74 years of age at the time of his death. And he would win the 1960 Rome Olympic Games, winning a gold medal. Now, Ali would win the World Heavyweight Championship crown, 1964, by stopping Charles Sonny Liston in Miami Beach. March 4th, 1968, Joe Frazier would win a New York SAC World Heavyweight Championship title. 1968 to 1970, he would win and vacate the crown. The technical knockout over Buster Mathis Sr. Win the undisputed World Heavyweight Championship crown. Hold it from 1970 to 1973. 1964 Olympic gold medalist in Japan. Won the WBA World Heavyweight Championship crown over Jimmy Ellis in the 4th round with a well-executed left hook, knocking him out. New York's Madison Square Garden. And he would win the vacant WBC Heavyweight Championship crown. The Ring Magazine belt. Would lose the crown to Big George Foreman, January 22nd, 1973. What a fighter Joe Frazier was. Muhammad Ali was full of guile, knew how to taunt his opponent, but he couldn't get to Joe Frazier's spirit. Joe Frazier didn't like Muhammad Ali because Joe Frazier gave Muhammad Ali some love, put it in his shirt pocket. Ali was on some tough times. And he went out of character with Ali. Ali asked him to do a few things just to try to get the fight going, and Joe Frazier did it. Joe Frazier did the back and forth with Ali in front of a camera. He would never do that. Joe Frazier would get on a telephone with Howard Cosell to talk to Muhammad Ali. He would never do that. Anything Muhammad Ali asked him to do, Joe Frazier did. Joe Frazier was invited to the White House to talk to Richard Nixon, who was the president at that time. Muhammad Ali asked Joe Frazier, when you see Nixon, do me a favor. Talk to him about getting me my license back so you and I can finally get this thing going. And while you're there, mention to him about our people. Joe Frazier went to the White House with his mother. Ali's watching on television. Richard Nixon puts his arm around Joe Frazier's mother. Meanwhile, Joe Frazier had embraced the moment. Ali was suspended for not going to the Vietnam War. He practiced his conscientious objective. And they would take Muhammad Ali's license away and his passport. And at that moment, Muhammad Ali thought that Joe Frazier, who he had asked to go down and mention his license situation and mention his people, felt that Joe Frazier didn't carry out that task. For that, he would call Joe Frazier and Uncle Tom. And Joe Frazier said he never peeked through windows. Muhammad Ali laughed and said, that's a peeping Tom. I'm calling you an Uncle Tom. You see, the issue between Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier was a man of principle. He wanted to live and let live. He wanted everyone to be equal. He wanted peace and harmony. On the other hand, Muhammad Ali was a civil rights activist. He felt unjust when he came home from the Olympics in 1960, and he was not allowed to sit in a cafeteria in his hometown and order a meal. That's when his eyes opened up and realized the world he was living in. Joe Frazier assigned to close to 250 men in Clover Lanes. Larry Merchant, who was a sports writer for a Philadelphia paper, would later on join HBO Sports Telecast 1973. And Muhammad Ali didn't see how Joe Frazier, who he felt was manipulated by the system, could play into that. Joe Frazier had a family that he had to feed. He was an honorable man. And Joe Frazier did at that time what he felt was necessary to take care of his family. For that you cannot discredit him for. Had the pleasure of meeting Joe Frazier. Had the pleasure of visiting his gyms. More than one occasion. Joe Frazier couldn't be more of a stand-up individual. Out of all the hundreds of ex-fighters that I've met. It was always an honor for me to shake the hand of Joe Frazier. Felt like a vice grip. But he had the heart of a teddy bear. He was a remarkable human being. The way he raised his sons and daughters. Georgie Benton, R.I.P., was an amazing human being himself. Willie Reddish. You had so many down there. Charlie Green in those gyms. But Joe Frazier was a hell of a fighter. And it was an honor for me to write about him in my project. Muhammad Ali, on the other hand, wasn't always loved like you may think. People didn't start honoring Ali until when his career was just about over. Ali and Joe Frazier had a fight in the Philippines. It was called the Thriller of Manila, or in Manila. And there's a referee who had refereed that fight, who later came out and talked about the Manny Pacquiao situation. He later on went to say that he had blisters in his foot because it was so hot and he was moving around so much. That's how brutal that fight was. He couldn't understand how these fighters were able to breathe. The gloves were waterlogged. Ali was about to pass out, and he was about to quit in that corner. But Eddie Futch didn't give Muhammad Ali a chance to quit because he would stop the fight in behalf of his charge, Joe Frazier, who had a hematoma over his eye. The end swell couldn't stop it. Joe Frazier didn't want to quit. Eddie Futch did what was best. Joe Frazier was a family man. March 8, 1971, Muhammad Ali would take on Joe Frazier in a 15-round bout, New York's Madison Square Garden. Muhammad Ali would hit the deck in the 15th round with a vicious left hook that was executed by smoking Joe Frazier. And Joe Frazier would win on a unanimous decision. Ali would weigh 215 and Joe Frazier weighed 205.5 pounds. The referee was Arthur McCanty. On January 15, 1972, Joe Frazier would stop Terry Daniels in Dallas, Texas, 1 minute and 45 seconds of the fourth round. Joe Frazier weighed 215.5, and Daniels weighed 194 pounds. He would dust him off in the fourth round. Frazier weighed 215.5, and Daniels 195. That's amazing. Fight took place in New Orleans. May 26, 1972, Joe Frazier had stopped Omaha's Ron Standard between the fourth and fifth rounds. The Standard couldn't continue after the fifth round. Joe Frazier weighed 218 pounds. The Standard weighed 217.5 pounds. And the referee was Zach Clayton. January 22nd, 1973, smoking Joe Frazier would stop Joe Frazier. George Foreman would stop Joe Frazier 1 minute and 35 seconds of the second round. And this fight took place in Kingston, Jamaica. Howard Cosell, with a brilliant fight call, was outspoken by Angelo Dundee. Dundee wanted that fight stopped because he felt that Joe Frazier would be killed in that ring. It would later be said that Joe Frazier was bounced around like a basketball. You couldn't have two more contrasting styles. These two men fought alike. And they weighed the same. The issue was George Foreman was taller and he punched a lot harder than Joe Frazier. You cannot execute what you cannot receive. And that's the problem Joe Frazier had. He wrote a check that his fist couldn't cash, but his jaw would go bankrupt. March 26, 1974. George Foreman knocks out Kenny Norton, San Diego, California. 2 minutes of the second round. The fight was held in Caracas, Venezuela. Foreman weighed 224.5 pounds, and Kenny Norton weighed 212.5 pounds. The referee was Jimmy Randolph. October 30th, 1974, Muhammad Ali would become the second man in boxing history to regain the heavyweight championship crown by stopping Big George Foreman 2 minutes and 58 seconds of the 8th round in Kashaka, Zaire. The first man was Floyd Patterson when he was stopped. Ingemar Johansson, 5 rounds. Floyd Patterson would become the heavyweight champion in 1956 that was vacated by Rocky Marciano. And Marciano would appoint Archie Moore and Floyd Patterson to fight for that title. Patterson would become the youngest heavyweight champion at that time, at the age of 21. He was the first man, and always will be the first man, in the heavyweight division to regain that title. March 24th, 1975, Muhammad Ali would knock out Chuck Wepner in 2 minutes and 41 seconds of the 15th round. Wepner weighed 225 pounds, and Ali weighed 223.5 pounds. The referee was Tony Perez. May 16th, 1975, Muhammad Ali halted Ron Lyle 1 minute and 8 seconds of the 11th round. The bout was held in Las Vegas, Nevada. Ali weighed 224.5 pounds and Ron Lyle weighed 219 pounds. The referee was Fred Hernandez. July 1st, 1975, Muhammad Ali would outpoint Joe Bugner over 15 rounds. And Ali weighed 224.5 pounds. Bugner weighed 230 pounds. The referee, Takiel Ugo. October 1st, 1975, Muhammad Ali was stopped, smoking Joe Frazier in 14 rounds. And this was probably one of the most brutal contests in the heavyweight division of all times. They were on foreign soil. The heat was unbearable. The conditions were unhumane. Both men gave it everything they had. They were out of their prime. Both men were in no man's land. Joe Frazier wanted to continue. Eddie Futch did not want Joe Frazier, who was a family man, to risk his life. Because another 2 or 3 punches could have done that. Joe Frazier couldn't see. Ali couldn't breathe. Dr. Freddie Pacheco said that Muhammad Ali's heart rate was above normal. Boxing has always been, and will always be, a sport that is dedicated to those who are willing to go out of character, because that's what you need when you get into troubled times in that ring. You have to be something that is not. You have to become someone that you are. My dad always told me, your mind is a battery and your heart is an alternator. You see, with a battery of a car, you can take out the battery after you start the engine and you can remove that battery. You don't need it anymore. But once you turn off that engine, it won't start again. You see, the alternator would kick in and it would run till the cells run dry. But your battery needs to recharge the alternator. Once your mind goes, your heart takes over. But your mind is gone, so you have nothing else to recharge. That's the ring that Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali was in. On the night of October 1st, 1975, in the Philippines. Referee was Carlos Padilla. That was his claim to fame. He would be allowed to get visa and come over to the United States as a referee. And he would referee many fights. I knew Carlos Padilla. It's been reported he was in the pockets of some referee from commissions. He helped some fighters out during the course of his time as a referee, particularly his countryman, Manny Pacquiao. February 20th, 1976, Muhammad Ali would knock out Belgium's Jean-Pierre Koopman. 2 minutes and 46 seconds of the fifth round. Referee was Ismael Quinteros. Muhammad Ali weighed 226 pounds. He was getting up in age. But on April 30th, 1976, without point, Jimmy Young in Philadelphia, 15 rounds, at the Capitol Center. Ali weighed 230 pounds and Young weighed 209 pounds. The referee was Tom Kelly. May 24th, 1976, Muhammad Ali would knock out England's Richard Dunn, 2 minutes and 5 seconds of the fifth round. Muhammad Ali weighed 220 pounds and Dunn weighed 206 pounds. I'm going to end it here. Muhammad Ali was a special fighter, but he was a special human being. He once talked a man out of a ledge from jumping. There's more to Muhammad Ali than just boxing. There's more to Muhammad Ali than just the face. Joe Frazier had his own way of living. He was a blue-collar worker, family man, man of his word, great constitution. He had a gym called Joe Frazier's Gym. There you can find the greats of the greats. Had the pleasure of being at that gymnasium several times. Had the pleasure of knowing, smoking Joe Frazier. They used to call him Big Joe. And his immediate circle, that's what they call him. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Thanks for listening. Be well. Peace. Do me a favor, if you can hit the like button, I would appreciate that.